A wounded German shepherd crawled through a blizzard, not to survive, but to find the man who once chose her fate. When Jack Callahan opened that door, he didn't just let her in. He let his past walk back into his life. She was bleeding, freezing, and someone was already out there, hunting her like she wasn't meant to exist. Because this wasn't just a dog. This was the one that had once refused his order and lived with the consequence. And now, she came back. Not for safety, but for him to face what he started. Before this night ends, Jack will be forced into a choice no man should ever have to make. Save the one who never left his side, or protect the one he once tried to erase. And if you've ever had a moment you wish you could take back, you'll understand exactly what this choice means. Tell me where you're watching from, and when this story ends, I want to hear what you felt. Well, thank God for the second chances we don't deserve. And if you believe in stories like this, please like and subscribe. Help this channel reach 1,000 subscribers so I can keep telling stories that matter. The wind had been screaming for hours, not howling, screaming, a constant hollow pressure against the walls of the cabin, as if the night itself was trying to push its way inside. Snow slammed sideways across the narrow windows, erasing everything beyond them. Out here along the Alaskan coast, winter didn't settle. It took. Jack Callahan stood in the dim light of a single lamp, one hand resting on the edge of a scarred wooden table, listening without really meaning to. He had learned long ago that silence wasn't the absence of sound. It was the absence of threat. And tonight, there was no silence. Rex lay near the stove, his large frame curled tighter than usual, ears flicking at things Jack couldn't hear yet. The dog's muzzle had gone gray over the years, but his eyes hadn't dulled, not even a little. Jack glanced at him once. That was enough. Something was wrong. Then it came, and a faint, uneven scraping, so light it could have been the wind dragging a branch across the door, so thin it barely survived the storm. Jack didn't move. It came again, not louder, just closer. Rex's head lifted slowly, not snapping up, not alert in the usual way. This was different. His body stayed low, but his gaze fixed on the door with a stillness that tightened the air in the room. The third time, there was no mistaking it. Not wood, not wind. Claws. Dragging. Jack exhaled once, slow, steady. His fingers flexed slightly at his side. Not fear, not hesitation. Just the body remembering how to prepare before the mind caught up. He crossed the room without hurry, boots quiet against the floor. The metal handle of the door felt colder than it should have, even through his calloused palm. For a second, he didn't turn it. Not because he was afraid of what might be outside, and because he knew that once he opened it, whatever waited out there would become his problem. The scraping stopped. Then, a broken, almost silent whimper. Rex stood, not barking, not moving forward, just standing, every line of his body angled toward the door. Jack opened it. The storm hit him like a wall. Wind tore into the cabin, dragging snow and ice across the floor. For a heartbeat, there was nothing but white. No shape, no distance, no world beyond the threshold. Then something collapsed at his feet. Heavy. Final. Jack dropped to one knee without thinking. A German shepherd. Female. Large, but reduced somehow by the way her body gave in beneath his hands. Her fur was soaked dark, stiff with frost, matted with blood that had frozen and thawed and frozen again. Her breathing was shallow. Too shallow, He slid his arm under her shoulders, feeling the slack weight of shock. Not fresh injury, sustained loss. Behind him, Rex let out a low sound. Not a growl. Something deeper. Jack shifted slightly, pulling the dog closer to the warmth of the cabin. And that was when Rex's posture changed. Not toward the dog. Past her. Into the storm. Jack felt it before he understood it. A line. Invisible. Precise. He turned his head just enough. The shot cracked through the wind. Something punched through the doorframe and slammed into the wall behind him, splintering wood in a sharp, contained burst. Not random. Not close. Measured. Jack didn't flinch. His body had already moved before the sound reached him, dragging the wounded dog fully inside as he kicked the door shut with controlled force. Silence didn't return, but something else did. Focus. He stayed low for a second, listening, counting. No second shot. No rush of footsteps. Just the storm again, swallowing the distance. Rex moved then, stepping between Jack and the door, not looking at him, not waiting for instruction. Watching. Jack's gaze dropped back to the dog in his arms. Her eyes were open. Amber, dimmed by pain, but not unfocused. Not panicked either. Aware. He shifted her carefully toward the rug near the stove. Snow melted beneath her, turning into dark patches that spread slowly across the worn fabric. "Easy," he said, his voice quieter than the storm deserved. The word wasn't for her. Not entirely. As he adjusted her position, the porch light spilled faintly across the open edge of the yard before the door had sealed completely, and Jack saw it. Shapes. Small. Scattered. For a moment, his mind refused to place them. Then it did. Puppies. German shepherd. Too young. Too still. They lay across the snow like something dropped and forgotten, their small bodies stiff, their legs curled inward as if they had tried to hold onto warmth that never came. Not gathered. Not protected. Left. Jack's jaw tightened, not outwardly, not in any way that would show. Inside, something shifted. Not sharp. Not loud. Just deeper. Behind him, the wounded dog Bautaitisdaus made a faint sound, trying to lift her head. Not toward him. Toward the door. Jack followed the angle of her movement. She wasn't looking at the storm. She was looking past it, at where the bodies lay. "She came back," he murmured, almost without realizing he'd spoken. Not for shelter. For them. Rex didn't move, but his tail lowered slightly, just once, a motion so small it would have gone unnoticed by anyone else. Jack reached for the door again. He didn't open it fully this time, just enough to step out into the wind. The cold hit harder now, or maybe he just noticed it more. Up close, the sight was worse. There was no struggle in the snow, no tracks circling, no signs of a natural end. Just collapse. One where it stood. Another halfway turned. Another stretched forward, as if it had tried to keep going. Jack knelt beside the nearest one, gloved hand pressing lightly against its chest. Nothing. The second. Nothing. The third. He paused. There. Faint. Weak. But there. A breath. He didn't think. Didn't weigh options. Didn't look back. He gathered the small body into his coat, then moved to the next. By the time he returned inside, the storm had already begun to erase everything behind him. He shut the door firmly. This time, it held. Inside, The wounded dog lifted her head again, straining forward despite the pain. Jack set the two fragile forms down near the stove. "They're not gone yet," he said, more to the room than to her. Her eyes locked onto his hands, not pleading, not begging, waiting. Jack glanced once toward the door, toward the place where the shot had come from. Whoever had fired it hadn't missed. They had chosen not to. And that meant only one thing. "They'll come back," he said quietly. Rex didn't look at him. He was already facing the door. Morning did not arrive so much as it revealed itself. The storm had burned out sometime before dawn, leaving behind a silence so complete it felt staged. The coastline stretched pale and rigid under a sheet of frozen light. Snowdrifts had reshaped the ground, burying edges, smoothing out the violence of the night. Inside the cabin, the air was thick with heat and something metallic. Jack had not slept. Nova lay near the stove, wrapped in 2 layers of wool blankets. The blood had stopped spreading, but it hadn't stopped existing. It clung to her fur in dark, stiff patches. Her breathing came shallow, uneven, like something she had to remember to do. The 2 surviving puppies lay against a folded towel, their movements small and uncertain. One trembled constantly. The other barely moved at all, except for the faint rise and fall of its chest. Rex had not left the door. He wasn't guarding it the way he used to, alert, reactive. This was quieter. He simply stood there, facing outward, as if waiting for something that hadn't decided whether to come back. Jack knelt beside Nova, pressing a cloth gently against the wound along her flank. The entry was clean. Too clean. No tearing, no jagged edge. Whoever had taken the shot had done it with precision and restraint. Not a hunter, not a mistake. "Hold on," he muttered, though he didn't expect her to understand the words. Her eyes shifted slightly toward him. Not trust, not fear. Recognition. It unsettled him more than anything else. A knock came mid-morning. Solid, measured, not hesitant. Jack didn't reach for a weapon. He didn't need to. Whoever had fired the night before wouldn't announce themselves like this. He opened the door halfway. A Mason Reed stood on the porch, already brushing snow from his coat before being invited in. He moved like a man who had spent decades working around cold, efficient, economical, and entirely unimpressed by it. His back had bent slightly with age, but his eyes hadn't softened. "You look worse than the storm," Mason said, stepping inside without waiting. Jack stepped aside. Mason's gaze swept the room once, then settled on Nova. He didn't ask what happened. He didn't need to. "Still alive?" he said instead. "For now." Mason crouched beside the dog, his movements slower but steady. He didn't touch her immediately, just watched, assessed. "Military shot," he said after a moment. "Not civilian." Jack didn't respond. Mason looked up at him once, briefly, then stood. "I'll call Claire." Jack nodded. "Doctor." A Claire Bennett arrived an hour later, her truck tires crunching sharply over packed snow. She stepped out with a kind of quiet urgency that didn't come from panic, but from habit. Her auburn hair was pulled back tightly, strands escaping at the edges from the wind. Her expression stayed focused even before she saw what she'd been called for. Inside, she paused only long enough to take in the scene. Then she moved. "Clear me space," she said, already setting down a compact medical case. Jack shifted the table aside. Mason fed more wood into the stove without being asked. Claire knelt beside Nova, gloved hands moving with controlled precision. She cut away the matted fur around the wound, revealing a small, dark entry point. Her brow tightened slightly. "No exit," she said. "Bullet's still in." "Can you get it out?" "Not here," she replied. Not without killing her faster. She continued working, cleaning, stabilizing, checking reflexes. Then she paused. "Hold her steady." Jack placed one hand along Nova's neck, the other bracing her side. Claire passed a scanner slowly along the dog's shoulder. A faint beep. She moved it again. Another beep. Slightly different tone. Claire frowned. "That's not right." Jack looked at her. "Microchip?" "Yes, but not registered." She passed the scanner again, slower this time, her eyes narrowing as she read the tiny display. "There's an ID string," she said, "but no owner data, no registry match. It's like—" she hesitated. "Like someone wiped everything except the access key." Jack's jaw tightened. "Can that be done?" "Not legally." She angled the scanner again, testing different positions. "It's still active," she added. "Whatever system it belongs to, it hasn't been disconnected." The room shifted, not physically, but in weight. Jack felt it settle somewhere behind his ribs. "She's still on something," Mason said quietly. Claire didn't answer. Instead, she looked at Jack. "Who else knows she's here?" Jack didn't respond immediately. That hesitation was enough. The man arrived just after noon. No engine roar, no sudden movement. Just the sound of tires stopping on the far side of the yard, deliberate and unhurried. Rex was already at the door before Jack stood, not barking, watching. Jack stepped outside before the knock came. The man stood a few feet from the porch, hands visible, posture relaxed in a way that suggested confidence rather than carelessness. He was in his early 40s, maybe. Tall but narrow through the shoulders. His coat was dark, well-fitted, without logos or markings. Clean. Too clean for this place. His eyes were pale blue, not cold. Just distant. "Mr. Callahan," he said, as if confirming something already known. Jack didn't answer. "I believe you came into possession of a dog last night," the man continued. "Possession?" Jack repeated. A figure of speech. The man reached into his coat slowly, carefully, and produced a folded envelope. "No trouble," he said. "We'd like to resolve this quietly." He held it out. Jack didn't take it. "How much?" he asked instead. The man's mouth curved slightly. "Enough." Jack glanced at the envelope once, then back at him. "No." The answer came without weight, just final. The man didn't react immediately. He studied Jack instead, the way someone might study a structure before deciding whether to dismantle it. Then he nodded once. "That's unfortunate." He lowered the envelope. "You don't understand what you're holding," he said. Jack's expression didn't change. "Then explain it." The man considered that, then shook his head slightly. "No, I don't think I will." A pause. The wind shifted, carrying a thin layer of snow between them. Then the man said, almost gently, "You're not holding a dog, Mr. Callahan." His eyes moved past Jack, toward the cabin. "You're holding something that was already erased." Jack felt Rex step closer behind him. A silent presence. The man turned, walked back to his vehicle, and left without another word. No threat. No urgency. Just certainty. Inside, Claire looked up the moment Jack stepped back in. "Well?" she asked. Jack closed the door. "They're not guessing anymore," he said. He reached for his phone. There was one number he hadn't used in years. He stared at it for a second longer than necessary, then pressed call. It rang twice. A voice answered, flat, alert. "Kessler." Jack didn't bother with greeting. "I need you to run an ID string," he said. "Off-grid, no logs." A pause. "Where did you get it?" Jack looked at Nova. "At my door." Another pause, longer this time. Then, "Send it." Jack ended the call. Across the room, Nova's eye opened slightly again. Not fully. Just enough. And for a moment, Jack had the distinct, unwelcome feeling that whatever had been erased had not forgotten. Night returned without warning. The sky didn't darken gradually. It simply folded in on itself, swallowing what little light the day had offered. The cold deepened with it, turning the air sharp enough to sting the lungs on every breath. Inside the cabin, the fire had burned low. Mason had taken the chair by the wall, half awake, one hand resting on his knee, as if even sleep required readiness. Claire had left hours ago, promising to return at first light with proper equipment. Jack hadn't moved far from Nova. Her breathing had stabilized, but only just. The bandage along her side had darkened again at the edges. The two puppies were quieter now, their small bodies pressed into each other for warmth, instinct taking over where strength failed. Rex stood near the door again, not guarding, waiting. Jack noticed it the second time. The first he had dismissed. Old habits. A dog trained too long to ignore movement. The second time, Rex shifted, not toward the door, but toward Jack. A small motion, barely a step. Then he looked back at the door, and stayed there. Jack exhaled slowly, watching him. "You hear something?" he asked, though he already knew the answer. Rex didn't respond. He didn't need to. Jack stood, pulling his coat on without urgency. The fabric felt stiff where it had dried unevenly from melted snow. His hand brushed briefly against the rough stitching along the left sleeve, the thread catching slightly under his fingers. He opened the door. The cold didn't hit as hard this time, or maybe he just expected it. The world outside had settled into that strange stillness that followed violence. Snow covered everything again, smoothing out the ground, erasing what had happened hours before. No tracks, no signs. Nothing left behind. Rex stepped past him without waiting. Jack followed. They moved along the edge of the yard, then beyond it, into the low line of trees that marked the start of the forest. The snow was deeper here, uneven, pulling at each step. Jack stopped once, glancing back at the cabin. A faint shape against white. Warmth. Light. Control. Then he turned away from it. Rex didn't slow. Nova shouldn't have been able to stand. Jack knew that before he saw it. But when he stepped back inside, only briefly, only to check. She wasn't where he had left her. The blankets had shifted. One edge dragged slightly toward the door. The puppies were still there, huddled together. But Nova was not. For a second, his mind refused the image. Then he saw her. At the threshold. One paw across it. The rest of her body trembling with the effort of holding itself together. "Don't," Jack said, the word sharper than he intended. She didn't look at him. She stepped forward. Barely. But enough. He moved fast then, reaching her just as her legs gave out again. His hand caught her under the chest before she hit the ground. Her body was cold again. Too cold. "Stay down," he muttered. But she twisted slightly in his grip, not resisting, redirecting, toward the trees. Jack followed her gaze. Rex had stopped there. Not moving. Waiting. Jack looked back down at Nova. Her eyes were open, focused, not on him, on the direction Rex had taken. And for a moment, something in Jack's chest tightened, not from urgency, not from fear, from recognition, not of her, of the intent. He wrapped her in one arm and stepped back outside. The cold bit deeper now, seeping through the layers of fabric faster than before. The wind had dropped, but that only made the silence heavier. Rex moved ahead, not looking back. Jack adjusted Nova's weight, feeling the strain in her body. She wasn't unconscious. She wasn't passive. She was enduring. They moved into the trees, further than Jack would have chosen on instinct, far enough that the cabin disappeared behind the white and the trunks. The forest thickened, branches heavy with ice, bending under the weight. The ground dipped slightly, then leveled out again. Rex slowed, then stopped. Jack stepped beside him and saw it. And at first, it didn't register as anything specific, just a shape that didn't belong. Too straight, too deliberate, half buried beneath snow and time. A structure. Low, reinforced, forgotten. Jack stepped closer. The door hung slightly ajar, warped by years of cold. The metal handle was rusted, but not broken. No footprints led to it. No recent disturbance. Just abandonment, or something that wanted to look like it. Nova made a faint sound. Not a whine, not pain. Something quieter. Jack pushed the door open. The air inside was stale, heavy with dust, and something older. Metal, oil, insulation long past its purpose. Rex entered first. Slow, controlled. Jack followed. The beam of his flashlight cut through the dark in a narrow line. Walls, tables, equipment. Not random. Organized. Or what had once been organized. Then the symbols came into view. Faded stencils along the far wall. Numbers. More codes. And beneath them, a name. Sentinel X. Jack's grip tightened slightly around the flashlight. He hadn't seen that designation in years. Not since before. He stopped the thought. Moved forward. Papers lay scattered across one of the tables, edges curled from moisture. A terminal sat nearby, screen dark, casing cracked but intact. Rex moved to the far side of the room, nose low, tracing something Jack couldn't see. Nova shifted again in his arm. Jack lowered her carefully onto the floor. She tried to stand, failed, but didn't stop trying. He watched her for a second, then looked up. At the wall ahead, a monitor flickered faintly as he brushed dust from its surface. Power shouldn't have been running, but something remained. A residual current. Enough. He pressed the button. Static. Then, a feed. Grainy. Distorted. But visible. A training room. Concrete floor. Marked lines. A dog stood at one end. Still. Alert. At the other end, a figure. Partially obscured. Then the angle shifted. The dog moved forward. Stopped. Its body tensed. Waiting. A voice cut through the static. Clear. Cold. Do it, or we end it. Jack didn't breathe. He knew that voice. He didn't need to see the face, but the camera gave it to him anyway. Younger. Sharper. Uncompromising. Him. On the screen, the dog didn't move, didn't attack, didn't obey. It looked up instead, directly at him, then turned its head away. The footage glitched. Cut. restarted. But Jack didn't need it anymore. He looked down. At Nova. Her eyes met his. Not accusing. Not forgiving. Just there. And for the first time since she had collapsed at his door, he understood why she had come back. Not for safety. Not for help. For him. By the time Jack carried Nova out of the facility, the cold had changed again. Not sharper. Not harsher. Quieter. The kind of quiet that didn't belong to nature. Rex stayed close this time. Not leading. Not watching ahead. Just staying within reach. His movement slower now. Deliberate. He didn't look back toward the structure they had left behind, as if he already knew it had stopped being empty. Jack adjusted Nova's weight in his arms. She had gone still again, not unconscious, but conserving whatever was left. Her breathing was shallow, but steady. That was all that mattered. For now. They made it back to the cabin without speaking, because there was no one to speak to. Mason was still there, sitting where Jack had left him. Though he had moved the chair closer to the window, he didn't ask questions when Jack came in. He didn't need to. He saw Nova. He saw Jack's face. That was enough. "You found something," Mason said. Jack set Nova down carefully near the stove. "Yeah." Mason nodded once. No follow-up, just acceptance. Rex moved to the door again. Not guarding. Listening. It started just after nightfall, not with sound. With absence. The wind had died hours earlier, but now even the small noises, the settling wood, the shifting heat in the stove, seemed to pull back, leaving the cabin in a vacuum that pressed against the ears. Jack noticed it because Rex did. The dog's head lifted slightly, not toward the door this time, but toward the ceiling. Jack followed the movement. At first, he saw nothing. Then, a faint shadow passed across the far wall. Too smooth. Too controlled. "Drone," Mason said quietly. Jack didn't respond. He was already moving. Lights off first. One switch. Then another. And the room dropped into darkness except for the faint glow of embers from the stove. Rex shifted back from the door. This time, it wasn't waiting. It was bracing. The first signal came through Jack's phone. A short vibration. No caller ID. He answered without speaking. "Kessler," the voice said immediately. No greeting. No delay. "You're lit up," Kessler continued. "Thermal signature, grid tracking. They've locked your position." Jack glanced once toward the window. "How many?" "More than one unit. Vehicles still out of range. You've got... maybe..." A pause, keys clicking faintly in the background. 10 minutes before they close." Jack ended the call. No acknowledgement. No plan spoken aloud. He turned to Mason. "Time to move." Mason pushed himself up from the chair, slower than he would have 10 years ago, but steady. No hesitation. And just the quiet understanding of a man who had done this before. Jack moved to Nova. She didn't resist when he lifted her, but her body tightened slightly, not from pain, from awareness. Outside. The first beam of light cut across the snow. Not searching. Mapping. It slid across the yard in a slow, controlled arc, then disappeared. Another followed. Higher angle. Different source. They were already closer than Kessler had estimated. "Back way," Mason said. Jack nodded. They moved toward the rear of the cabin, keeping low, keeping tight to the walls. Rex stayed at Jack's side. Not ahead. Not behind. Equal. Jack paused once. Just once. At the edge of the hallway. Not because he didn't know what to do, because something in him had shifted. This wasn't avoidance anymore. It wasn't survival. It was recognition. They weren't here to retrieve. They were here to erase. The first shot came as they reached the back door. Not at them. At the lock. The wood splintered inward, fragments scattering across the floor. Controlled. Measured. Jack didn't wait for the second. He kicked the door open from the inside, pulling Nova tighter against his chest as he moved through the frame. Cold air rushed in, sharp enough to burn. Behind him, Mason followed, one hand gripping the edge of the doorframe for balance. Rex was already outside. The second shot came then. Lower. Closer. It struck the snow just past Jack's left side, kicking up a burst of ice and powder. Not a warning. Adjustment. They ran. Not far. Not blindly. Jack angled toward the tree line again, but not the same path as before. He moved through deeper snow, slower ground, harder to track, harder to predict. Behind them, movement. Not loud, but there. Boots, more than one. Mason stumbled once, catching himself on a low branch. "I'm good," he muttered before Jack could turn. They reached the trees and stopped, because the path ahead wasn't open. It was occupied. 3 figures stood between the trunks, spaced evenly, not hiding, not rushing. Their silhouettes were clean, deliberate, each one positioned with the kind of awareness that didn't come from guesswork. The man in the center stepped forward. No weapon raised, no urgency. Just presence. Adrian Voss. He didn't look like the others. Where they were built for force, he was built for control. Lean, upright, movements economical to the point of precision. His coat was dark, unmarked, his posture straight without stiffness. His eyes settled on Jack first, then on Nova, then, briefly, on Rex. Recognition flickered there. Not surprise. Assessment. "You took longer than expected," Voss said. His voice wasn't loud. It didn't need to be. Jack didn't answer. He shifted Nova slightly, adjusting her weight again. Rex stepped forward. Not aggressively. Positioning. Voss noticed. "Still keeping him," he said, almost to himself. Then his gaze returned to Jack. "You shouldn't have come back here," he continued. "Not with her." Jack's jaw tightened slightly. "She came back," he said. Voss inclined his head, acknowledging the distinction. "Yes," he said. "That's the problem." A pause. The cold pressed in around them, still, waiting. "Give her to me," Voss said. No threat, no emphasis, just a statement. Behind him, one of the men shifted slightly, adjusting his stance. The other remained still, weapon angled downward, but ready. Jack didn't move. Rex did. A step forward. Subtle. Enough to change the line between them. Voss's eyes flicked to him, then back. "You know what she is," Voss said. "You've seen it." Jack said nothing. "Then you understand," Voss continued. "She doesn't belong to you." That landed differently, not because it was wrong, because it was incomplete. Jack looked down at Nova. Her eyes were open again, focused, not on Voss, on him. For a second, everything else narrowed. The men, the weapons, the cold. Gone. Just that look, not waiting, not asking, knowing. Jack exhaled slowly. Then he made his choice. He shifted Nova slightly higher in his arms and stepped forward, not toward Voss, past him, Rex followed immediately. Mason, a step behind. The first man reacted, weapon rising. The shot rang out. This time, it hit. Mason staggered, a sharp breath breaking from him as his body folded slightly at the side. But he didn't fall. Jack didn't turn. He kept moving. Because stopping now meant something else entirely. Behind him, Voss's voice came again. Not louder, just different. "Then this ends here," he said. They didn't get far. The next impact came from the side, not a bullet this time. Force, fast, controlled. Rex went down hard, his body twisting as he hit the snow, a low, cut-off sound escaping him before he went still. Jack stopped. Not because he chose to, because something inside him refused to take another step. He turned. Rex lay a few feet behind him, unmoving. Nova shifted in his arms. Barely, but enough. And suddenly the choice wasn't abstract anymore. It was right there, in front of him. 2 lives, 2 pasts. One he had built, one he had broken. Jack closed his eyes for a fraction of a second, then opened them, and stepped forward. Without Rex. The relay station wasn't meant to be found, not by accident, not by anyone who wasn't already inside the system. It sat beneath a collapsed ridge 2 miles north of the forest line, half buried under snow and ice, its outer shell indistinguishable from the terrain, unless you knew exactly where to look. Jack hadn't known. Kessler had. "Old contingency node." Kessler's voice came through the earpiece, thinner now, strained by interference. "Hardline access. If anything from Sentinel X still exists, that's where it roots." Jack didn't respond. He was moving too carefully to waste breath. Nova hung in his arms, lighter than before. Not because she weighed less, but because something in her had already begun to let go. Her breathing had thinned into something almost silent, her body no longer fighting to hold itself together. And behind him, Mason leaned heavily against the rock wall, one hand pressed tight against his side. The blood had slowed, but not stopped. Claire crouched beside a rusted panel, gloves already off, fingers working through frozen latches with controlled urgency. Her face had lost the calm precision from earlier. This was something else now. Focus sharpened by time. "Panel's intact," she said. "Power's minimal, but stable." "Patch it," Jack said. Kessler cut in immediately. "I'll take it from there. Just get me signal." Claire pried the casing open. A faint hum followed, weak, uneven, but alive. "Connection's up," she said. Jack lowered Nova carefully onto the ground beside the panel. For a moment, nothing moved. Then her eyes opened. Not fully, just enough. She didn't look at Jack. She didn't look at Claire. She looked at the open panel, at the wires, at the system. Jack felt it then. Not memory, not guilt, understanding. "She knows," he said quietly. Claire looked up, confused. "What?" Jack didn't answer, because Nova was already trying to move. Her legs didn't hold. She collapsed once, then again, but each time she adjusted, shifting weight, forcing herself forward inch by inch toward the relay panel. Not instinct, not panic. Purpose. Kessler's voice sharpened. "I'm seeing irregular activity on your end. What's happening?" Jack didn't respond. He just watched. Nova reached the edge of the panel. Her body trembled, barely holding position. Then she pressed her head, lightly, deliberately, against the exposed wiring. For a second, nothing happened. Then, the system surged. The screen flickered to life, lines of corrupted data stabilizing into streams. Kessler swore under his breath. "That's not possible." Claire froze. "She's triggering it," she said. Not disbelief, recognition. Jack felt something shift again, deeper this time. Not in the room, in himself. Nova wasn't data. She was the key. The signal burst outward, not loud, not visible, but everywhere at once. Kessler's voice came back, tight with focus. "I'm pulling it. Logs, archives, full project files. It's all here. Jesus, it's all here." Claire moved quickly, connecting the external transmitter, routing the data through her own secured channel. "Uplink established," she said, "sending to every oversight node I can reach." Jack stood, because he felt it, before he heard it. The crunch of snow above them, measured, unhurried. Adrian Voss stepped into view at the edge of the ridge. No rush, no weapon raised, just presence. Behind him, the others remained at a distance this time, not advancing, not needed. "It ends here," Voss said. Not a threat, a conclusion. Jack moved slightly in front of Nova, not shielding, positioning. "You're too late," he said. Voss glanced at the panel, at the data streams flickering across the screen, then head back at Jack. "No," he said calmly. "You are." A pause. The cold settled between them again. "You think exposure changes anything?" Voss continued. "We built something that works, something that saves lives." Jack's jaw tightened. "You built something that obeys," he said. Voss inclined his head slightly. "Yes." Jack shook his head. "No." He stepped aside. Just enough. So Voss could see her. Nova, still pressed against the panel, still holding the connection. "She refused," Jack said. Voss's expression shifted. Not surprise, not anger. Something closer to disappointment. "That's why she was removed," he said. "Removed," Jack repeated. Voss met his gaze. "Failure has no place in systems like this." Jack didn't answer immediately. He looked at Nova, at the way her body had stopped trembling. Not because she was stronger, because she was done resisting. "Or maybe," Jack said quietly, "it's the only thing that makes it worth anything." The data transfer slowed, then steadied. Kessler's voice came through again, lower now. "It's out," he said. "Multiple channels. They can't bury this." Claire exhaled sharply, tension releasing in one controlled breath. "Confirmed," she said. "We're done." Jack knelt beside Nova. Her head had slipped slightly from the panel. Her breathing wasn't there, not labored, not fading. Gone, no sound marked it, no final movement, just absence. Jack placed one hand gently against her neck. Warm, still. He didn't move for a long time. Voss didn't speak. No one did. The silence wasn't heavy. It was complete. Jack lowered his head slightly, resting his forehead against hers. "You were right," he said. Not an apology, not forgiveness, recognition. And behind him, Mason shifted weakly against the rock, still alive. Claire wiped her hands once, steadying herself. Above them, the wind began to move again. Not violently, just enough to remind them the world hadn't stopped. Voss stepped back. Not defeated, not victorious, irrelevant, because the system he had built no longer belonged to him. He turned without another word and disappeared into the snow. Spring didn't arrive quickly. It never did. Weeks passed before the ice along the shoreline began to fracture, before the air lost its edge, before the ground remembered how to soften. Jack stayed. Not because he had nowhere to go, because leaving would have meant something he wasn't willing to repeat. Rex survived. The injury had slowed him, changed the way he moved, but not the way he watched. Mason recovered slowly, stubbornly refusing help, even when he needed it. Claire came back often, not just for the animals, for the work. Because there was work now, not repair. Something else. Jack built it without naming it at first. A place for the ones that didn't fit, didn't obey, didn't belong to systems anymore. The sign came later. Simple, unpolished, no logo, just words carved into wood. No one left behind. Rex lay near the entrance, head resting low, but eyes always tracking movement. Jack stood beside him, one hand resting lightly against the dog's shoulder. Not holding, not commanding. Present. The wind moved through the trees, softer now. The world hadn't changed, but something in it had been made visible, and that was enough. Some truths don't need to be saved. They just need someone willing not to turn away. Jack couldn't undo what he had done. He couldn't bring Nova back. But in the moment that mattered most, he chose differently, and that choice was enough to change everything that came after. In life, we don't always get a second chance to fix the past, but we do get the chance to decide who we become because of it. Maybe you're carrying something you wish you had done differently. Maybe there's a moment you still replay in your mind. What if the way forward isn't about erasing it, but choosing, today, not to look away again? If this story stayed with you, I'd like to hear what you felt. Where are you watching from? What part of this meant something to you? And if you believe in stories about second chances, quiet courage, and the kind of strength that doesn't need to be seen, consider subscribing. Cribbing. There are more stories waiting. Wherever you are tonight, I hope you find the courage to face what matters, and the peace to keep going.